Hey there, folks. So welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the solo debut record from Niall Horan called Flicker. You know, I think I've been looking forward to this album more than, well, pretty much every other critic I've seen. And that's not entirely surprising. If you followed One Direction's career arc, Niall Horan, he didn't really seem to stand out. Liam and Louis had more writing credits, Zayn and Harry seemed to have more personality and wanted to make bigger artistic statements, with admittedly mixed results, sure, but the ambition was there. Hell, even when I covered his debut single, This Town, I expressed some surprise that he was out of the gate ahead of Harry and Liam, who would go on to both having more success throughout the course of this year in singles on the Hot 100. And yet, there was an odd part of me that actually kind of liked this guy. I didn't think his writing was all that stellar, but he seemed to have good instincts and a decent sense of maturity that I respect, and I liked a lot of his collaborators. I always thought that Tobias Jesso Jr. worked better behind the scenes than on his own albums. There is a credit from Dan Wilson, formerly of Semisonic, and that's normally a staple of quality. Somehow he managed to get a guest appearance from Maren Morris, of all people. And you know what? For as much as Greg Kurstin has frustrated me as a producer over the course of 2017, for this sort of understated acoustic project, I hoped that he would be a good fit. On top of that, it was just over a half hour. Didn't seem to have the huge ambition to go big that Harry and Zayn did. And if the writing was good, maybe smaller stakes could serve Niall pretty well. So, okay, did we get anything worthwhile out of Flicker? Well, folks, I know so many of you will not believe this, but I'd argue that this album is pretty damn close to the best project associated with One Direction that they've released thus far. Now, I'm not kidding. I would handily take this over nearly every other One Direction project or either of the albums from Harry or Zayn, and while I'm not surprised that a lot of critics are dismissing it, especially in the UK, I am pretty disappointed they have because I'm not sure they got the point. Now, granted, I'll freely admit that most of my personal liking from this album is coming from its very particular lineage and sound that just so happens to be resonating particularly well for me, but at the same time, Niall has released this sort of deceptively sharp soft rock record that has the potential to quietly get really big. And you know what? Deservingly so, I should add, because this album, it's pretty great. And what's important to emphasize here with Flicker is that it's not a complicated album, not by a long shot. The content falls in either hookups or breakups, pretty pop standard boilerplate, but with a sort of straightforward earnestness and framing that doesn't even seem to try for deeper layers, most because they aren't essential. They likely got pared away in the refinement process, a classic example of less ultimately being a whole lot more. Now, granted, the only reason that this is ever considered as an excuse in music is if the presentation is able to back it up. And you know what, for the most part, it does. The writing avoids the obvious missteps in lyrical construction, and despite some moments that can kind of test my patience, like the post-breakup inquiries of Too Much to Ask I mentioned on Billboard Breakdown, still a little bit annoying here, there is enough heartfelt detail and good songwriting choices that aim for universality without feeling bland or too obvious. Yeah, the closer, You and Me, can feel a little on the nose, kind of presumptuous, but Niall brings enough maturity and self-awareness to actively take responsibility for his own unusual and testing career, and then ask the girl what he can do to convince her that it'll work in the long run. And really, that maturity is a pretty solid grounding presence on this record. From lingering acknowledgments that he has to move on with This Town, to the overdone expectations that he acknowledges on Paper Houses, to actually sounding pretty convincing at facing the problems in the relationship on Fire Away. No, it's not quite better than Chris Stapleton's version of the same title, which has grown on me considerably, but you know what? This is still effective. I like it. Hell, even though On the Loose is clearly trying to be Hall & Oates' Man-Eater blended with Chris Isaac's Wicked Game and then updated for 2017, it's a smart enough song to crib notes from The Weeknd's False Alarm and highlighting how he himself has fallen multiple times for this girl. And it helps that by playing for understated tones, Niall can rely a lot more easily on the natural charisma in his voice. He's never going to command a room in the same way that Harry Styles can, but through the sincerity behind This Town, the pain that feels genuine on the title track or Paper Houses, hell, even some of the playfulness on Slow Hands that kind of grew on me, especially on that bridge, it comes through in that smaller space. It's understated, it's subtle, but hey, it works. But now, we have to deal with the real reason why this album connects for me, and something you might not have noticed from the opening singles: the production and the sound, because just like Harry Styles did, Niall Horan's Flicker is very clearly indebted to the past, and whereas Harry Styles is aiming for a half dozen different styles and ended up kind of a mess in that regard, Niall, he's laser focused. This is a record that more often than not wants to sound like early 80s Fleetwood Mac, with a few glances back to Rumors to boot. Now, let's be honest here, Mirage is not my favorite Fleetwood Fleetwood Mac project by a long shot, especially coming off the wild experimentation of Tusk. But you know what? I gotta be honest, the sound here still naturally clicks for me. The guitar-driven melodic grooves with just enough tastefully smooth instrumentation and some of the strings and keyboards to back up the real bass lines, the vocal interplay and harmonies that both Maren Morris on Seeing Blind and Bridget Sarai on Since We're Alone. Niall is so desperate to emulate those vocal harmonies, and of course, hooks that seem almost insidiously designed to get in your head. I know it's a low bar here, folks, I get that, but considering how much reverb, swamp, percussion over melody, utterly boring and forgettable pop I've covered over the past couple of years, it's a welcome treat when Niall and his crew actually write songs with a real tune behind them. From the pop country leanings of the Seeing Blind and Fire Away to the most naked Fleetwood Mac imitations with Since We're Alone. And yes, it definitely helps that frequent co-writer Julian Bonetta is adapting tones that he refined over the last two One Direction records. But they're easily the instincts that made the best of their material, drawing inspiration without feeling like a direct ripoff. Now, that's not saying that all the production works. The oddly clipped vocal pickup on the verses of Slow Hands, it kind of remains annoying to me. The flattened and reversed 90s-esque electric tones on You and Me, they reflect a style that doesn't really fit with the rest of the album. And despite some good texture, you do get the sense that the percussion is still a shade bit too loud at spots. Can't get rid of 2017 that fast. More urgently though, it's a shame that Niall doesn't really bring some of that energy or bite that made Fleetwood Mac transcendent at their best. I get that he's going for a bit of a low-key, understated charm, but he could have definitely afforded to add a little bit more bite if he wanted to. But you know what, as a whole? Okay, look, it's impressively easy to dismiss records like this. It's middlebrow. It's basic. It's not challenging. It's not adventurous. And if you're going in expecting this to be a pure market calculation given where Niall comes from, well, you've already made up your mind. I'm not going to change that for you. But you know what? It's hard for me to listen to this and not see an impressively refined and effective pop record that knows exactly what it is, owns the lane comfortably, and then delivers a short but remarkably solid release. The tones, they call back to the past, but they never feel like a throwback. The writing is simple, but with enough mature detail and poise to actually stick with you. And Niall, he's a sincere enough performer to feel entirely convincing with a lot of these tunes. And with all these hooks, which again, they really stick with you, it's hard to deny that this record succeeds impressively in everything that it's trying to do, especially for a solo debut that has more consistent grooves and writing than anything One Direction has ever released. Hell, probably more so than most of Ed Sheeran and his ripoffs work too. So yeah, I know this might be controversial, but this is an 8 out of 10 for me. Definitely a recommendation. It's a great record, and you know what? Right now, Niall has proven the most fully formed as an artist post-boy band. I can't wait to hear more, man. Fine work indeed. Fine work. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know, bit of a surprising point for this review, but hey, I want you guys to check this out. Links in the description below, and I got the poll up there. I'm curious where other One Direction fans fall on that. There's your opportunity to tell me. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you guys want to get more involved in my scheduling process or maybe support this channel, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my channel, and once per week, for the higher tier contributors, get to add records, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. More details right over there, but till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.